In explaining what the resurrection is like, Paul uses an image even a child can understand. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas. We've now reached the very heart of Paul's discussion of the resurrection in 1 Corinthians 15. But he begins with words in this little section that seem unnecessarily harsh to us. Every time I read these words at the graveside, I cringe just a little bit. As I read this section, you'll see why. Paul says, "But someone will ask, how are the dead raised? With what kind of body do they come? Fool, what you sow does not come to life unless it dies. And as for what you sow, you do not sow the body that is to be, but a bare seed, perhaps of wheat or of some other grain. But God gives it a body as he has chosen, and to each kind of seed its own body. Not all flesh is alike, but there is one flesh for human beings, another for animals, another for birds, and another for fish. There are both heavenly bodies and earthly bodies, but the glory of the heavenly is one thing, and that of the earthly is another. There is one glory of the sun, and another glory of the moon, and another glory of the stars. Indeed, star differs from star in glory. So it is with the resurrection of the dead. What is sown is perishable. What is raised is imperishable. It is sown in dishonor. It is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in power. It is sown a physical body. It is raised a spiritual body. If there is a physical body, there is also a spiritual body." I think you can see why I cringe. Like the Corinthians, we too want to know about the resurrection and what our bodies will be like. One of the most common questions people ask is, will I know my loved ones when I get there? Will they recognize me? But we have to remember that Paul wasn't just answering an innocent question by people wanting some assurances. He was responding to a snarky, challenging question from people who thought the idea of resurrection was, well, silly and unsophisticated. That's why he responds with the harsh word, fool. It's not aimed at us and our desire for some sense of reassurance about what the resurrection will be like. It's aimed at the Corinthians who were being stubborn and obstinate. Still, Paul's answer, except for his charge of fool, gives us a really and truly pastoral answer. And in fact, it is one I refer to often, especially when I'm talking to little children about death. I've told this story before, but it is worth repeating. When I was a young seminarian, my paternal grandmother died. She had one great-grandchild, my then 4-year-old nephew, Peyton. In the short time he had known my grandmother, they had developed a real affection for each other. So when she died, Peyton had lots of questions, since it was the first death he was ever really aware of. His biggest question was, where is Mammy now? Since this was really a theological question, and since I was a seminarian, my sister naturally waited until I got back to Texas to assign me the task of explaining it all to Peyton. The only way I could explain it so that he could understand it was to use Paul's image of the seed and the plant. And it did make sense to him because he knew all about seeds. He knew about plants, and he knew that when you plant a seed in the ground, it develops into a plant that doesn't look anything like the seed from which it sprouted. I continue to find this a helpful image because when it comes to the resurrection, we get into unknown territory very fast. What the Bible tells us about the resurrection and about heaven is so little that we really do have little to go on. More than that, when we're talking about the resurrection, we can only resort to analogies to describe it, since it is literally indescribable. The only thing I change with Paul's metaphor is to use an acorn instead of a seed, and an oak tree instead of a shoot of wheat. Everyone knows what an acorn looks like, And everyone knows what an oak tree is, no matter whether a white oak, a pin oak, or a live oak. Simply to say that in the resurrection we will be changed is not quite enough. To compare it to an acorn and an oak tree gives us a little better picture. Will we know one another in the resurrection when our bodies are so radically changed? Of course we will. How will we recognize each other? I haven't got a clue, but we will. That I know. Tomorrow, Paul joins this image of the resurrection with his earlier remarks about Adam and Christ. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.